States Marcus Davis. He's got Tim Boetsch getting ready to fight UFC 205. Rafael Natal is Tim's opponent. Great fight for Tim. Before you get into that, though, Marcus is from Bangor, Maine. Like, he's a Maine kid. He's an East Coast kid.
Yep.
I was on Facebook, and you're in Carolina. So why'd you move to Carolina?
So the reason really behind moving to North Carolina was when we were in Maine from right around 2010, my wife started to show some signs of illness, and it got very bad. She got false diagnoses and stuff, so she got worse and worse and worse. And then come about 2014, she was diagnosed with Lyme disease. And at that point, I mean, it had become chronic. I mean, it was so bad. She needed help walking and everything. So it got real serious. When she finally kind of came out of it after all of her treatment, she ended up with a thing called Raynaud's disease, which affects your extremities and blood flow and whatnot. So, at 6 o'clock in the morning, it might only be like 50 degrees outside, but she'd touch me and her hands and her feet would be absolutely frozen. So, she had to get out of there, and she had family actually down here in North Carolina. So it made a lot of sense for her at first to get down here. So they came down here last year, right around September. And then I stayed in Maine while I continued to put employees into my gyms so that I could leave and make sure that everything was going to be okay. So it took me until February of this year to actually finally have everything set. Then I came down here, and now after I came down here, I got recruited for the company Tap Out that now owns a lot of, they're in the middle of owning a lot of different gyms. We were talking before, a lot of the Bally's gyms that are actually in the, up in New York and those areas are going to be switching over to Tap Out. And they did a deal where their martial arts is powered by Greg Jackson. So they're teaching Greg Jackson's style of MMA. And so I went out there, spent some time with Greg, and just to become certified under his style and picking up really the thing, as you would know, Greg, but the people, you would know, Frank, is that a lot of people don't know what really is Greg Jackson about. And you and I would be able to tell people, well, he's really the tactician, the tactics. He's the guy that is, kind of like the Yoda behind, if we're looking at Star Wars, he's the Yoda of MMA. And that's what's different about what we teach. We do teach, obviously, technique, but it's the belief that you can have the best technique in the world, but if you don't have the strategy or the tactics to go with that technique, it's like having a bullet but not having the gun. You got to know, or having a gun and not knowing how to have cover or how to clear a house or whatever in the middle of the night. So without those tactics, sometimes technique can be useless, and that's the big thing with Greg Jackson's program is we're constantly talking about like the OODA loop, or we use different tactics like we talk about Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, or Sun Tzu's Art of War, and even some more current military type tactics. But that's the difference. So that's what I'm doing here, and then that led me into also I do a lot of work now with LEO, the law enforcement officers, and obviously military too. So I really love doing that. As we've done that together, traveling all over the world. So it's a big thing when you guys like us and you're fighters and you come to the end of your career and we're too old to be able to serve because we never got to serve. Some of us. So this is the only way we can kind of give back, and that's it.
And it's weird. Like we were talking off air that it's so interesting to me to find guys that are my age and age demographic that are still finding ways to stay in the fight game besides just owning their own little gym in their own little town, and that is a daunting task unto itself. Like I don't ever want to run another gym. I don't ever want to own another gym. It's such a hard job just to keep the doors open and try to make money off it is crazy. Like I don't understand how you do it. I don't get how Jackson I get because so many people go down there now, but how Couture does it. For a while, Couture in Vegas was the haven. It was the top spot, and then it fell off for a little while, and it was like there's so many changes that have to happen to keep gyms alive. For me, it's reffing. There's no more commentating jobs out there to be had, so stop by commentating, and I just ref, and that's my way to get back, and that's kind of my game in it. So with these tap out gyms, I mean, obviously they could have done a licensing agreement with Extreme Couture. They could have done a licensing agreement with the UFC. Why do you think? But of course, you work for Tap Out, so guys at home understand that that's where his paycheck's coming. Why do you think Tap Out became the one that Bally's wanted to switch all of their gyms over to?
Well, I think it comes down to what is your sales, what is your demographic. So here's the difference. You and I both you just said what you said about owning a gym is exactly what I say about owning a gym. It sucks. So so fighters are broke. And the reason why fighters are broke is because 90% of them, we're seeing a little bit different now where you get a lot of these college educated like wrestlers, people that have gone to college. But, it wasn't me. I was a street kid that grew up, your typical, fighter, broken home story guy. So a lot of your fighters are broke. And, so you're not going to make a lot of money and run a good business off that. So the way that this kind of runs is like, you go into one of those ATT, like the Taekwondo associations, and you see a bunch of little kids running around and they're doing their thing, and then you see adults having fun or doing whatever. Now, it's not like that per se, but the idea or the philosophy behind it is a little bit like that. So we're doing MMA for everybody rather than just MMA for fighters. So with that said, we do have we don't zero in on that one crowd. We do fitness classes that are kind of like CrossFit. Then we do fitness classes that are like boxing exercise or like Taibo, that old stuff. We do we do a kickboxing fitness, not kickboxing, but kickboxing fitness. We do a MMA fitness. So all this is different types of fitness classes. So, in MMA fitness, you might be hitting a bag for a second, but now you're on the ground doing some applicable movement. Might be shrimping, might be spinning for an arm bar, but it's drilling. It's just a lot of drills and stuff like that. But you're doing functional fitness, multi-planar training rather than linear, anybody who lifts weights knows that you get stronger just doing this or just doing this, but you're not going to get stronger moving on your transverse plane or whatever. Most things are sagittal plane or frontal plane movement. You're not doing that other stuff.
You have just lost 90% of the people that follow MMA. They're completely lost right now because you're talking about muscle groups and not being straightforward and not moving sideways, moving lateral, moving backwards. Like he's talking about different movements. And this is the thing with our sport. When people look at football, they were raised around football their entire lives. They kind of get football, right? You understand the rules. Soccer, if you're from Europe, you understand soccer or proper football. You understand baseball. Obviously, the World Series, just got done with the Cubs. Like, people understand the game of baseball. When they're watching MMA, they have no idea really what they're looking at. Even people that practice just jiu-jitsu separately, boxing or kickboxing separately, or wrestling separately. They still love MMA, but they really don't understand what they're looking at.
Yeah.
And it's man, I wish we were 10 years younger, right? With the knowledge we have now, we'd be crushing everybody.
They didn't have, right now we're starting to see that kind of science come into this. All your other sports were years ago, they were hiring these educated guys in kinesiology and physiology and it's one thing to know kinesiology, but it's another thing to know physiology. So they are different. And so to be able to, I look at it like this. So I study all that stuff all the time. And my former, one of my former trainers, one of the guys that really kind of laid out the mathematics behind fighting for me so that I could kind of cheat because I'd never grappled before. And then I ended up in the UFC. I ended up in the Ultimate Fighter, never even grappled. And then I go into the UFC right out of that, and I ended up ending with more submission wins than I had anything else. And he kind of gave me a cheat sheet on how to do that. And he had a PhD in biomechanics, and and had a lot of studies in kinesiology and physiology. So he was helping me with that. And again, I think that something you're starting to see more. Like you watch Conor McGregor, and again. I don't like invest a lot into one thing. I'm all about moderation of everything. Too much kickboxing isn't good. Too much jiu-jitsu isn't good. Too much, you got to do a little bit of everything. Same with weightlifting. If you lift weights all the time, it's not going to be good. If you have one piece of pizza, you're going to be fine. But if you have 20 pieces of pizza, you're going to have trouble. So everything's moderation. So with that said, my focus right now is on two separate things. One is this MMA for everybody, whether you're a little kid, you're somebody who's struggling and you're 400 pounds and you need to lose weight, but walking on a treadmill isn't for you, or you're a soccer coach mom who, while her kid's doing martial arts, you're going, well, what am I going to do? Sit here and watch them? No, you're going to jump over here and you're going to hit a bag so we can have multiple classes going on at the same time. Mom can do, you see what I mean? This is the business model now of how do we take martial arts and actually, or MMA as a business model and make money all the time. So the people that are the richest people in the world, as we know, are people who are making money while they're sleeping. They have a product, they have this. So if all you can do is, if you got 7,000 square feet and you're teaching one class, you're losing money. You're losing money. So you gotta have machines that people are working out on, and you're sucking money out of that. You gotta have products on your shelves that you're making money on. You gotta be selling memberships. You gotta have a mat that people are grappling on, another area that people are hitting some bags on, and another area that people might be doing some CrossFit on. So if you have that, you have the ability to make money, and then you got to push it out on everything else that we do, which is the social media and website stuff and all that. So that's what I'm doing now.
Busy as hell. Like that's crazy trying to get all that put together.
Yeah, it's working out. We've only been open. We opened in October, so we've only been open the last 2 months. Things are going really well, but I'm spending a lot of time. So I just had Tim in camp, obviously, for the last 6 weeks. He was living here with us and staying here. We were training together. So, that was really tough because I got to train him in the mornings and then I got to train him at night. But then I'm working too throughout the day, both at two different gyms here. So one of the other gyms that I go to and I kind of work at or work with them, they're a bunch of military and law enforcement and people, and they're doing their thing. And then at nights I head to the Tap Out Fitness in Raleigh and I teach there. I'm the master coach there. So how is this going to work with the other gyms then when they open up? Like, you're the master coach, the one in Raleigh. Are you going to be the master coach at every single one of these other? No. So once they buy it, once they, you know how it is. You buy the business in the box. You buy that from Tap Out. And so what they have to do is that this is where Greg Jackson kind of got involved. They've got to go to New Mexico and get certified under Greg. So I flew out there and I stayed out there. We rented a house and I stayed out there for a while and trained with Greg. The other people that didn't have my background, they're not, UFC fighters. They had to go out a lot earlier. So when I landed, they literally picked me up from the airport, brought me to Greg's, and I took the very first test. I didn't even, I tested. Then 2 days later, I took the intermediate test, and then I took the very final test, which covers, the brown belt, black belt. And I took all that stuff on my last day or my second to last day. And then what is pretty cool is you have to take all of your learning, and then at the end of the course, you've got to watch a fight. So the fight that they gave us was John Jones and Textera. So you have to watch that fight. You got to break it down minute by minute. You have to identify all the tactics or strategy that could be going on that you see by minute. You've got to be able to, then after that, you've got to be able to do cluster theory. So you got to be able to cluster out things that John Jones, and you're using John Jones now, that could get better at. So you got to be able to watch that fight and dissect everything that happened that was good. What are things that were bad in that fight? Identify it. And then you've got to do the presentation to everybody that's part of this whole group that's going through the class. So it's pretty cool. It was a really good experience.
The one thing that you said earlier that Greg is really good at is obviously he's the Yoda of MMA. He puts the tactics together. He understands the breakdown of the fights and all that. the course load sounds like he's teaching you to do just that. Like you're sitting down and you're watching a fight. So he's creating a bunch of rivals. That's basically what he's doing. Because what's going to happen is that one of these guys in these gyms at Tap Out are going to take the philosophy and the understanding of the black belt from Greg, go teach for a while at Tap Out. It happens in gyms everywhere because it's a gym society. He's going to quit, or he's going to get an argument with the big boss, or whatever's going to happen. He's going to leave, open up his own gym, and then he's going to start using the exact same tactics at his own place. But then now it's going to be obviously not against John Jones, but it's going to be against a Jackson guy. And now it's going to be this game that's going on. So Greg is out there teaching guys his way of doing it. But let's not forget, Greg has got 25 years on everybody. So it's tough to catch the master, no matter how much he's got way more experience than you. But still, it's crazy that he's developing and showing guys the thing that makes him one of the great coaches is that he's able to break down fights better than anybody else. Yeah,
he's again, I've been lucky. They say there's 3 of the greatest coaches in the world in MMA, and Mark Delagrati being one of them, who was my coach the whole time, and now I've been able to work with Greg. And it was kind of like, for me, I was able to fill holes that I didn't even know existed. So, like, I had already, I had done Jeet Kune Do, which was, a multicultural martial art. And I was a boxer, and I had done some jiu-jitsu, George Gurgel, and then working with Mike DeLuca and all this stuff. And then obviously coming from a multicultural place like Sityo Tong is for my Muay Thai and everything. And you and I know like things like how do we do a feint, or how do we do maybe a draw, or set up certain traps. But I never thought about it in the way of patterns. And in the way, like how Greg, you and I know that fighting should be broken rhythm. It's rhythmic when people watch it, but they don't understand it's broken rhythm. You never want to give somebody rhythm because they're gonna get you. They're gonna tap into that rhythm. So you're broken rhythm. But we as human beings, as human being creatures, all fighters end up like when you watch, like you and I could watch a fight, and you and I will look at each other and go, "Did you see that?" And we'll know that a guy's doing something that's a habit. And once you can identify the habit, that's when you can set up, your attack plan on that. And that might be like a Mongolian attack, or you might do like a dilemma of 2 horns, and all these different like tactical, which I wouldn't even know what they were then. But I know them now because I've been working with Greg and have immersed myself into what his thought process is. And I'll never be like Greg. But again, I'm doing it, like I said before, I'm doing it in moderation too. I'm taking what I think will work for me, and I'm putting it into my personality and into my world. And knowing that I'm working with a lot of military and police now, it helps me with that too, because there's a lot of stuff, like I already did all that, other stuff like, working with Tony Blauer with the SPEAR system, spontaneous protective accelerating engaging response, or like fear, right? We know fear is false evidence appearing real, and all this kind of stuff, or the OODA loop now, and now the working with we know that the 3 C's are clear, control, and counter when we're talking about somebody with a weapon, or the 3 Ds, detect, decide, defend, all this different stuff now. It's all of it comes in, and it all makes sense with now that I can back that up with the tactics and strategy, not just the technique. So a lot of times I was teaching a lot of technique. It's like a lot of this, okay, a guy does this, you do this, a lot of this, but now I have a completely different outlook at it.
And that's one of the things I've always had with jiu-jitsu. I actually went and rolled yesterday with a buddy of mine, Tim, here in Hawaii. It was a Sunday. Went to the UFC gym, went to the BJ Penn UFC gym, open mat, had just ended. So we went in and got our own little space. And he kept doing stuff, and I'm trying to show him with gi on. And I'm not a gi guy by any means, but I've been wearing the gi. I'm like showing him, no, you should try to do this, like do this. And he would do, whenever I would put him in a particular position, he would do a particular thing. And whenever I put him in a particular space, he would do another particular thing. That's how jiu-jitsu has always been taught. Like, this is the arm bar, this is the triangle, okay, roll. Like, well, what signs am I looking at to get to the arm bar? What signs am I looking at to get to? What habits am I looking at? What am I doing? And so when I'm rolling with this guy, I'm like, I told him, I go, you've never been taught how to think. He goes, what do you mean? I go, you've never been taught how to think. you've been shown a position, a technique, but you've never been shown how to actually get to that position. So now you got to think about what's happening around that position. What's the guy going to do? And that's all what MMA tactics comes out to. And that's what makes Greg Jackson a great coach. Why Randy Couture is one of the best tape guys that can break down tapes on an opponent. The reason why Pat Miletich has so much success very early, because they were all that wrestling background that also knew how to strike. And then they turned out when Pat went from being a competitor to coaching guys, and whatever you feel about the guys in the team. You and I had conversations about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But they knew what they were doing, and they could think outside the box. It seems like now that Greg has actually taught you how to even think more outside of your box. And you've got a pretty big box. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff in that box. It's not little narrow vision. You have a really wide vision. Has Greg helped you be a better coach now, too, with Tim?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because so what happened is I believe like things happen, as you go along. And like you said, I have the same belief like you. I believe that now when I go into martial arts places, how people, put down, like you go into a karate place. Everybody's in the exact same stance. Everybody looks like they're the same robots and they're all doing the exact same thing. I'm seeing that in jiu-jitsu places too. So it's not the same, and you don't want to completely say, but there's a lot of similarities with that. So it stifles creativity. You and I come from a time of creativity where the wrestler thrives in chaos, the scramble. So you create the scramble. Strikers don't typically do that. Okay, the high-level strikers, typically what they do is they use a lot of technique, footwork, and things like that. They try to control the chaos. The barroom brawler turns it into a chaotic and might catch you. The professional good striker, like a Mirko Krokop, doesn't like chaos. But when he fights somebody that's able to suck him into it, we've seen him get knocked out, right? We've seen what's his name? The wrestler who passed away. But anyways, from Mark Coleman's gym, the black guy. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, Randleman. So we've seen guys be able to suck him into that and knock him out. The thing that when I grapple, so I go in and I roll with everybody. I roll with I have a bunch of buddies down here that are black belts and brown belts and everything, and I roll with them, and they all say the same thing to me. They all say, "You grapple weird." And I say, "What do you mean I grapple weird?" Tim Kennedy said the same thing when he was watching me when we were out there. They go, "You grapple weird." They go, "Your positioning sometimes feels like jiu-jitsu, but in the you start scrambles and you feel like a wrestler, but you do these other things." So, again, my grappling style is unique to me. So it will be hard for somebody who grapples with me to get a partner who's going to grapple like me, because I'm the boxer who originally said, I don't want to ever be taken down. So I focused on takedown defense. And then I learned that doesn't work. So I had to go backwards and do everything. And so I started to do everything, try to learn the martial art from scratch. And I'm like, wait, this isn't going to work either, because I'm already in the UFC. I don't have time for this. So I was able to figure all that stuff out, and luckily through Master Che and having good coaches and having good teammates and everything. But now I'm at a place where, like you mentioned before we started this part of the conversation, where I've taken all of that and I'm no longer a competitor. I'm a coach. So I'm using all this knowledge as a coach, and I see it now coming out, in the people that I'm working with. They're starting to, I'm able to help them grow as fighters without making them form into any. They don't look like me. They don't fight like me. They keep their creativity. And like Customato said, I try to discover and uncover. And when I see where their talent and their fire is, I just want to throw logs on it. I want to make it bigger. I don't want to say, don't ever do that. Don't do that. And I would rather say, if you're going to do that, watch out for this, because if I saw that, but I'm not going to stifle it. Somebody does something that, I might see and I might go, I would never do that, but they're doing it and it works for them. Why would I take that away from them? I don't want to take that away from them. I would just say, okay, continue to do that, but just be careful of this and be aware of this. If this happens, you have a couple of other tools that you could do. And that's what I believe. I believe that the worst thing a good coach can do is say, don't do that. Do what I say. I don't like that. I disagree with it.
That's why it was so easy for a long time to break down tapes, is because everyone got really predictable for a couple of years in the UFC. Everyone was very predictable what they're going to do, how things are going to go. And now it's completely changed. Now it's a lot more unpredictable going on again with the athletes. So
that's the difference, because you and I come from a time of fighters. This is a time of athletes. So it's completely different. There are guys that are fighting now. There are still a couple of fighters. Tim Boetsch is a fighter. He's the guy that's going to bite down on the mouthpiece, and he's going to take one to give one. So there's still some out there, but a lot of these guys, and I'm not knocking John Jones, but John Jones is a super athlete. He comes from a bunch of athletes. His family is athletes. He's got reach. He's got athletic ability, and so again, it is a different. It's just different, and I know I get in trouble if I talk too much on that. I get in a little trouble. I offend people when I talk about that. But again,
it's the reality of what's going on. Like back in my day, when Hughes and I were at our highest rivalry and we're getting ready for that second fight, whatever. If a street fight broke out, I wanted every single one of those MMA fighters behind me or with me. I don't want to be fighting any of them in a street fight because they were fighters. Now it's kind of like I'm not real concerned about a street fight breaking out at an after party because none of those fighters are fighters. Like none of them are going to bite down the mouthpiece. I'll see you and Boetsch over in one corner. You see Liddell over in another corner. You got Lawler in another corner. Those are the three corners I'm staying out of. That's where the fighters are. I'm staying away from those guys. Everybody else, I'm kind of okay. Even old as I am, even as broken down as I am, I'm still it's a street fight. I'll be all right. At this point, I'm not worried about these guys because athletes don't do well in street fights. They do really well in athletic competition. And that's what the UFC has become, is entertainment, athletic competition. So how hard is it for you now to take, of course you have Tim, who's still a fighter, but you've got other guys that are not fighters but are good MMA guys. How hard is it for you to coach those guys to be like, okay, you gotta keep moving forward because they don't have the same mentality that you did when you were competing?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is now, because you work with so many different people, you've got to be able to, you can't teach to the masses when it comes to fighters. You got to tailor make everything for that individual. So you're going to find people who unfortunately for them, you got the made fighter. I still talk about this. You got the made fighter, the person who's born fighter, and then you have the made fighter, the one that said, I want to do this and I feel like I can do this. And we know that the born fighter will hear gunshots and go to it. The made fighter will run. The born fighter will get hit, bite down on the mouthpiece and throw. The made fighter will fall on their back and curl up, not necessarily into a fetal position, but in a defensive position, not an offensive position. So when I work with people, I can see that pretty easily in sparring. When I see somebody who's sparring and I see them get their bell rung and they bite down and fight even harder back, that gives me a different perspective than somebody who gets their bell rung, backs away and tries to survive by staying away from them. So, and then it's the same thing or grappling. Like I've watched you, and I tell people all the time, one of the nastiest guys I've seen grapple is Frank Trigg. And it's because you're going to put somebody on defense so bad that they have no choice but to give you something. You're going to make them you so much pressure that you're going to stay on your back until you go, I'm losing. I have to do something to get up. And they give you an arm, or they give you your back, or they do something. That's us guys that are hunters, killers, and providers do. Then you have these other guys that they're just doing it because it's cool, or, I mean, you can get into all kinds of other reasons why guys do that. So I have had conversations with guys that I've said, again, it's the individual. I've said, these are things that you need to work on, and because of your style. And I don't tell them. I don't ever tell somebody, you're not a real fighter. I don't do that. I just keep that knowledge to myself. And, and again, I try to tailor make something that makes sense for them. So, and I also keep, it's like any marriage or any business. The first way something falls apart is bad communication. So I try to communicate as much as I can. And I'll say to them, this is what my thoughts are. These are why these are my thoughts. And I tell them why. And then I say, what do you think of that? And is there anything that you feel that you do well that I'm not kind of seeing? Or if there's anything like, I'm big about, so I've taken like pad work. Like anybody that's ever watched me pad people, they'll tell you it's a completely another level of pad work. So what I've done is I've taken pads and I've turned it into, at first, I'm going to train you in a way that's going to hit you on every level. Not just turn you into a robot, jab, cross, hook, or whatever. But my pad work is based on not only auditory, can you follow directions? It's based off what you see, so triggers that you'll see. It's also based on what you feel. So it's energy involved. So I might push, I might pull on you, I might grab you, I might try to do whatever. So originally what I do is I base some things out on, if I do this, you do this. If I do this, you do this. So I do that at the beginning. Then I want it to change, and it's going to become into, I lead you at first. Then you're going to kind of start to take over. So if you ever watch me and Tim Boetsch pad, people watch it and they say to me, it looks like you guys are fighting the entire time. And I say, well, we are. And they'll say, how do you know what he's throwing? And I say, I don't. And they go, how do you catch it? And I go, I'm lucky. So honestly, I mean, there's a lot of times that I'm just because, and the reason why is because I do this all the time now. I'm lucky and I'm there and I can catch it, in my hand-eye coordination and everything. I do better from what I feel than I do from what I see, because as we know, your eyes can lie to you. I think that I just, as a coach, as holding pads, doing that all the time, you kind of get into that, because I had the background, a little bit of the Jay Keaty background, like we talked about, you watch those guys when they're doing their sticky hands, which is called chi sao. So when they're doing that stuff and that energy stuff, it's that's based off what you feel. I know that when I'm watching now somebody who I'm padding, they're gonna still, because I know that fighter, because I've taken them from, I'm gonna program you with these reactions right now. Then by the time we get to the level that they get to take over, I know them. And so I know when they're going to shoot on me, and I know that when they're going to throw the kick. And so sometimes they do surprise me, and I take one and I suck in my breath and I'm going, oh, like that. Or I get a bloody nose or whatever, but this nose, there's not much left in there to be in. But anyways, and I just make it through it. And guess what? I got a better fighter because of it. I take my whoops and I got a better fighter. This camp, we had a couple of times where Tim Boetsch, so I constantly watched footage of Natal and started to break stuff down and everything. And then, I would literally get up in my living room or my kitchen or whatever, and I would start mimicking his movement. Like no different than like if I was Lyoto Machida, right? We got the little Lyoto Machida thing going on, but watching his movement and what he does, and I would watch it. And then I would try to find guys that were a little bit like that, like guys that will be righty but switch to lefty. And then when I didn't have it, I had to suit up. And and I'm raw. By the time they get in, I'll be bigger than Natal. When I was training with Tim when he first got here, I was like just below 210. But now I'm like 200 because I've been training so much with these guys. But I would mimic him, and I would fight lefty, righty. I'd have to get in there, and I know that I'm a better, well-rounded, striker than Natal. I'm not the world-class jiu-jitsu guy he is. But I would get in there and I'd work with Tim, and then I would say after we'd be sparring or whatever, I'd go to the guys that I knew were really high-level black belt jiu-jitsu guys we had in the gym, and I'd say, get on him now, get on him. And then I would whisper in their ears and say, I want you to do this to Tim. I want you, and trying to help them beat Tim. And then, and that's just the way you do it. And then Tim, sometimes that would piss him off. But I would, and he understood why I was doing it, but still you get pissed off. And, but then by the time the end of camp came, Tim turned to me and he said, this is the best camp I've ever had. I feel better than I've ever had. And he's mentally now there. And so that's the most important thing. If you go out there, it's not, what you did in the past doesn't matter. What you did in camp doesn't really matter. It's what you do that night in the cage. Who are you that night in the cage? So he was so mentally solid this whole camp. And then when he went home the other day to Pennsylvania, because we fly out tomorrow to the UFC, he was just so solid, man. And I really feel, this will be the best Tim Boetsch we've seen.
I'll be interviewing Tim later on this week once he gets to New York. He's going to get on with me on Skype, so we'll be talking to Tim here in a little bit as well. 2 more questions for you before you get out of here. You can just make them one-word answers if you want.
Sure.
Woodley versus Thompson. Who do you got?
I think Woodley is actually gonna take it. I think that Woodley's going to be able to control the range. And I think that's where this fight comes down to, is who can keep it. If he can keep it in kicking and punching range, he can win. If he ends up in that trapping, grappling, or wrestling range, he's in a lot of trouble.
Alvarez McGregor.
You know what? Again, I'm not exactly sure who, but I do believe that the way to beat McGregor is with the wrestling. And Alvarez if he fights him like he did Pettis, he's going to give him a lot of trouble. And Alvarez could win it fighting that way. He's coming off a fighting another southpaw, but Conor McGregor breaks some rules as southpaws. And here's the thing. As a southpaw, you get taught as a boxer to keep your right foot on the outside of their left foot and throw straight left hands and right hooks, or right hooks and straight left hands to get them to walk into your left hand. McGregor, because of his length, allows you to skirt outside of his right foot, and then he throws his left hand over behind into the ear or the neck of the guy with the right hand. And he seems to hit a lot of guys with that. So my thought process after watching the fights is I see that when Alvarez fought the last guy fought, who was the champ, the Brazilian guy, who was the champ, lost the title. Yeah, Dos Anjos. Yeah, that's who it is. He's a lefty, and he was constantly staying on the outside of that foot, which is supposed to get you out of range of that left hand. McGregor lets guys step over there, and he's still hitting them with it. So it's if the fight takes place and it stays as a kickboxing match, McGregor will win that fight. If Alvarez can push him against the cage early, Alvarez will win that fight.
I think McGregor wins the first 2, and then it's a crapshoot 3, 4, and 5 if it gets that far.
He has to get it. He'd have to. I agree. He'd have to take him out in those first couple of rounds, And
anything can happen in rounds 3, 4, and 5. It's McGregor and it's Alvarez. Like, these guys are trained athletes. So we'll see that this whole card from top to bottom, from the opening of Carmouche and I forget who she's fighting, all the way up to Alvarez McGregor. Every fight on this card is amazing. So I can't wait to watch.
It's a better card than 200.
Yeah, I believe this is the 200 card. But I'm a big conspiracy theorist guy. I feel like they knew this was going to happen for 205, so they sabotaged 200 on their own purposely just to make 205 better. Because there's no way they could have had a stellar 200 and then a stellar 205. There's no way. You don't have enough fighters. Just can't do it. So This one is amazing. Well, good luck, Marcus. Have fun down there in New York, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm glad things are going well for you. Hopefully not working you too hard and you actually get to still beat your kids and shake your wife a little bit in between sessions.
Yeah, I got her in the kitchen making a sandwich right now. My wife just yelled out, "Dick!"
That's awesome. You wear the pants in the family, but she tells you what color to wear every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Marcus, take care, brother. We'll talk again soon.
All right, Frank. Be safe, man.